Hello, my name is Kapil, and I'll be talking today about understanding the practices and challenges of networked orchestration in research communities. Supporting ill-structured problem solving is something that we critically need to support. But in supporting this practice, we need to be able to provide communities that have continual learning, provide ways of help seeking, and provide collaboration between members so that help seeking needs can be addressed. However, orchestrating this kind of work in a distributed learning community is often limited in efficacy and scale due to practical orchestration challenges. These, for example, can include novices struggling to effectively plan their research or not knowing who to ask for help from when. And even if they do know where they could get some help, the resource might be limited on time or completely unavailable altogether when they try to get help from them. And so while experts in the community can help to orchestrate some of these planning tasks and help-seeking interactions, as these communities grow in size, it becomes difficult for the few experts to handle all the needs of novices. In particular, traditional models of orchestrating research involve one-to-one apprenticeship or a one-to-one-to-one hierarchical model of interaction, but these models still create bottlenecks in who can help whom. Instead, we consider this idea of networked orchestration, where you now disperse control across the entire community, and so you don't have the bottlenecks that you do with the previous models. And one example of using networked orchestration to orchestrate research communities is the Agile Research Studio model, which is a socio-technical model for scaling research communities of practice. And it allows a small number of experts, such as 2 faculty members and their PhD students, to sustainably train 20 to 30 undergrads at any one time by providing various agile methodologies, different social structures, and virtual tools to support the orchestration process. While prior work in ours has shown that the efficacy of networked orchestration can be effective, we currently lack an understanding of how mentors and students work with the many structures and processes present in the model and what challenges they face on a day-to-day basis. Studying how mentors and students orchestrate or self-direct their research towards their learning goals in such a community could help provide us insight into how and why the organizational model behind ARS is effective, and also what might be needed to remedy some of the challenges. So our work builds on a lot of prior work that's been done to study communities of practice for complex work. Historically, this starts with collaboratories, which are organizational structures that enabled remote researchers to interact with other collaborators and colleagues, access scarce equipment, share data and computational resources, for example. And more recent work has studied how creators for social crowdfunding platforms rely on different technologies and experts during the funding process, and how makerspaces provide access to experts at different stage of product development to help ensure that products are developed effectively. And so while these communities have access to various resources, they don't actually provide the same kinds of structures that we saw earlier with network orchestration in ARS. And so what's interesting here is that our work is actually studying something a little bit different, where we want to understand how members use these existing structures to solve their problems, rather than just emerging needs going to people who can coach, for example. And this is especially important in our setting because many of the people who do research in this community are complete novices, and that requires them to learn how to do these help-seeking practices. On the tool side, there's been a lot of work in learning and work environments to study how to orchestrate the process. In classroom orchestration, much work is considered how you visualize student progress and understanding on lessons, so that if they have questions, they can be addressed by the teacher. But these works have primarily been focused on addressing teachers' needs in these tools, and have also lacked discussion around the design consideration of orchestration tools broadly, especially when considering when students are actually self-directing their work and not just working through a pre-planned assignment. In problem-based learning environments, much work has been done to understand structures for tracking project needs, for planning future iterations, and for distributed scaffolding opportunities so that people can get help on different parts of their problem needs. And so while these facets are found in ARS and are needed for networked orchestration more broadly, we were interested in studying how members in the networked orchestration community actually interact specifically with these different multiple venues. And that builds on a lot of the work for distributed scaffolding, because in distributed scaffolding paper, it's mostly only studied with one or two different venues, whereas networked orchestration may offer 5, 6, or 7 different venues throughout the week that students can go to for help. And lastly, CSAW tools in the workplace have helped to study how we can do resource identification and help seeking in workplaces. And so while these tools broadly address the challenges of helping find appropriate resource for specific problems, they're limited in emphasis on teaching how to help seek and how to use different resources for different needs, which is extremely important in this case because many of the researchers here are novices, and that requires them to learn how to effectively work in such a community. And so, in addition, because networked orchestration also has explicit structures, we need to understand how the interactions that students have with those structures and with outlets more broadly and other people more broadly is done, and what difficulties come up. And so this leads us to the following 3 research questions we addressed through our study. So research question 1 is, how do mentors and students use the structures and processes in ARS to orchestrate the community? Research question 2 is, what breakdowns or challenges do they face during that orchestration process? And research question 3 is, how might we design new networked orchestration technologies to address these challenges that they face? And so our work makes 2 core contributions. The first is a qualitative study of networked orchestration in the context of one Agile research studio, which shows how students use resources to create and execute help-seeking strategies and the ways in which mentors support these processes. It also contributes knowledge about how networked orchestration may still have challenges that aren't addressed by having the existing resources or venues, and how later we might design future network orchestration technologies to remedy those challenges. And so for our study, we ran a qualitative study of one instance of an ARS, specifically the Design Technology and Research Program at Northwestern University. We conducted observations at special interest group meetings, which were used for planning for each SIG. There were 8 observations over 1 academic quarter, and each of these meetings were about 1 hour long, during which we collected field notes. We also ran an interview study using semi-structured interviews with faculty mentors, PhD students, and DTR students over 2 academic quarters. And we focus on asking how students use the various resources in DTR to resolve the things that they needed help with and what struggles they had during the process. We asked mentors how they supported students during that help-seeking process, and in any ways that they may struggle to do that process as well. The interviews were all recorded and transcribed afterward, and we took a thematic analysis approach to analyzing our data. And so throughout our analysis, we found that this general pattern for resolving and identifying needs through networked orchestration. And for this talk, I'll specifically focus on 2 really interesting pieces, which is the way that new needs are actually surfaced in the process of help seeking, and how needs are often rerouted back to the community to find more appropriate resources. And so starting with refining needs, mentors and peers help students refine needs that they initially want help on, and often this is done when students are unsure how to proceed with their work or unsure about alternative ways on approaching a problem that they're working on. So for example, one student came to discuss with her mentor about how she wanted to use a status update, which is a presentation during all studio meeting that everyone can give feedback on one person's project. And the mentor helped her understand and realize how to better use the time than she had originally planned, which allowed her to refine the thing that she was actually working on and eventually have a more effective status update. Without this intervention, she may have done something and still gotten great feedback, but there's actually something deeper here that she could have gotten even better feedback or even more useful feedback for her project, and that's what the mentor helped her do here. Students are also often rerouted to other resources when they come in asking for help with something else. And we found that this was done by both mentors and students, but in slightly different ways. And so what mentors often did was they would defer help requests that were made directly to them to others in the community if they knew that someone else in the community could both solve the need and was more available. And so, for example, in this instance, A mentor noticed that during one of the SIG planning meetings, a student was struggling to fill out their planning logs. But instead of addressing the issue at the meeting, which is for planning, the mentor routed the student to another resource in the community and had him seek help from them instead, saying that was something that we knew was not a good use of our time. It was affecting his ability to get help that he needed at SIG, and we knew that there was a built-in resource in the community that we can kind of punt him to. And so in this way, mentors are not only encouraging the use of the full community, but they're helping teach students when and where it might be better to get help for certain things versus other things, especially when there are other community resources. So peers also help with this kind of routing. And in this example, a student didn't know who to turn to for advice on qualitative work and asked her community mentor to point and asked someone in the community who was actually her mentor, another peer mentor, who then pointed her to a grad student that could help. And so she mentioned saying, I need help on qualitative interviewing because I don't really know what that entails. Who do you think I could go to for help? And the community mentor said, oh, this grad student is super knowledgeable about this. And I think that was my first experience reaching out to this set of people. And so in this way, not only did the community mentor help her identify and resolve the need that she actually had, but he also helped her learn about other resources in the community so that she can now go to them later. And in this way, through these examples, we see that network orchestration provides many different ways for you to get feedback, and that allows you to do much more of this factored help seeking so that no one individual, either mentor or another peer, for example, have to take the burden of all kinds of help requests. And that allows them to create strategies for help seeking that may use multiple different people and resources in order to resolve a need, such as this one. But there are still challenges, even though networked orchestration is effective in many ways for distributing help needs across a community. In particular, we found that students struggle to use the expertise of people that they are less familiar with, and mentors don't always know if students are working effectively outside of one-on-one meetings. Starting with the first problem, what we found is that students need to know the kinds of things people know about if they want to seek help from them. But because of the distributed community, it's often hard to know the expertise of everyone in the community and instead rely on people that are the closest to them in their project, which in this case would be their SIG head mentor and also their peers in their SIG. And so this one undergraduate quoted saying, so I feel like it would almost save me time to just go to help from the person I know who can help me, rather than trying to explore and understand, oh, I kind of want to get a sense of how this other undergrad can help me or this other undergrad can help me. And by falling back to and relying on these small groups of resources, there becomes greater burden placed on those more salient resources. For example, someone who might be very good at doing certain technical stacks like iOS or working on, say, study design, rather than other people in the community who are equally able and willing and free to help. On the mentor side, a key struggle was that students in the community are self-directing their work. And while this is really good for learning on the student's behalf, it does make it harder for mentors to know how students are working effectively outside of meetings. And for example, this one faculty member talked about how she didn't have any visibility into what the student actually did, when they actually did it, and if they did it before the other task that was really dependent on having to talk to this other student that she recommended during a one-on-one meeting. But because mentors don't have a good awareness of what's going on outside of meetings, it becomes difficult for them to provide advice on how to help students be more effective without first spending a significant amount of time diagnosing practices that are ineffective, which then limits the amount of time they can spend on actually coaching students and teaching students the skills they need to be effective in doing research and working in this kind of community. And so given these challenges, how might we design new orchestration technologies that support students and mentors in these kinds of research communities? So one implication is that we need tools that help track and surface expertise from people within the community. These kinds of tools would allow students to be more aware of who knows what in the community and might be able to help with different needs. Even still, a challenge for students could still be to identify the ineffective work practices in the first place. And so while mentors know how to resolve these issues and have effective mentoring strategies, they're extremely limited on time with students and can't address all the many needs and skills that students need to learn and build in order to be effective at doing research in these settings. So one thing we might try is to build tools that support mentors by allowing them to encode and describe their existing technologies to computers in a way that can be automatically monitored for. For example, by building off of prior work in computer-supported collaboration scripting, we might consider designing systems that can use data generated by communities like ARS that have many, many virtual tools that generate data about the way students are planning, the things they're working on, and the way that they're reflecting, and use those to actually encode mentor strategies for example, wanting to prevent students from overworking. And then have these strategies automatically execute by using that data available in the community. And this would allow students to get help and mentoring outside of meeting time without necessarily increasing the time that mentors need to spend on mentoring. And so the core takeaways for this talk are that networked orchestration provides a network of resources that community members can use to address their needs. And these needs might be refined in the help-seeking process through the help of others, and they also might be rerouted to other resources that are more available. And both mentors and peers play an active role in doing each of those steps. At the same time, there are still struggles to be effective in networked orchestration, specifically with students trying to identify resources that can help them, and mentors struggling to know how students are working outside of in-person meetings to provide them feedback on their work practices. And so the design implications are that we need new networked orchestration technologies that support these help-seeking and mentoring practices. And these might include tools for identifying resources in the community and for automatically encoding and enacting existing mentoring strategies so that the mentor can provide feedback outside of a meeting time without additional burden. Thank you.